Thank you, everybody, for coming in from outside, where it's extremely nice weather in the moment. Well, hopefully, we can keep you entertained for this hour and a half. My name is Scott de la Hunta. I'm the project leader for this Motion Bank project. I'm going to introduce the project. I'm going to moderate the presentation. And I'm joined here on the stage by Bill Forsyth, Deborah Hay, Jonathan Burrows, Matteo Farjan, Armin Weber, and Florian Yennet. And now speaking for, especially Bill and myself, our organization of the Forsyth Company and all of our partner institutions, we want to sincerely thank the Kulturstiftung des Bundes for its generous and really unprecedented support for this project. We also thank the Hessische Ministerium für Wissenschaft und Kunst, the Kulturfonds Frankfurt Rhein-Main, and the Alterna Kulturstiftung for their support of the project. Additionally, we want to thank the organizers here at Tanzkongress for hosting us and these other Motion Bank related events, and the installation next to Books on the Move. This is really a great context for us to be in, not only because so many of our peers and colleagues are here taking part, but also because the thematic focus on topics like translation, transfer, and mediation are also key topics for the Motion Bank research. The plan for this session today is going to go like this. I'm going to give a short introduction to our work, its broader context, and some of the activities. I'm going to ask, and I have asked Bill and Deborah and Jonathan in particular, and Matteo, to talk about what inspires them to publish their choreographic ideas in various media, so just to lay out some more of these topics on the table. That'll be followed by a presentation of Deborah's Using the Sky project, with Florian Yennet and Armin Weber, the digital artists working on the project, and myself. We'll explain the research process with Deborah and give a short tour of the tools and materials being developed for the website. Then we'll come back, so it's 4 parts. We'll come back to Deborah and Bill and Jonathan and Matteo for a first round of questions and comments on what you see, and then open it up here for discussion, questions, and comments. So that's the sort of agenda for this next hour and 20 minutes. So I think we can pack it all in during that period of time. So Motion Bank has many interconnected activities, and you can find detailed information about who's involved, the names of the people, and the names of the institutions on the website. And pretty soon we will have a new site with more documentation of the research project there. But I'm especially keen in this context and in relation to some of the other projects presenting here to say something about the community of practice we feel ourselves to be a part of. This community shares a commitment to bringing choreographic ideas and processes into newly productive relationships with general audiences and specialist practices. Many of these projects do this through a variety of initiatives that are, I think, essentially exposing process-based practices of talking, moving, writing, recording, notating, and scoring, normally somehow confined to the studio, bringing those in some way to a wider readership, a wider audience, through forms of publication. These forms range from text only to films, DVD-ROMs, websites, and even installations. And this kind of artist-initiated publication uniquely invites the study of ideas coming from inside of the practice. And this is also what we hope to achieve with the tools and materials made available through the Motion Bank project. So in addition to the guest artists we work with, we've run a series of workshops with other practitioners for whom writing, notating, and scoring are somehow central to their process. And some of these artists are actively involved in publishing this material, producing new resources coming out of the practice. And one of our main research goals in Motion Bank is to develop education applications of this kind of new resource. So we have an education work group comprised of individuals who've been involved in past projects similar to Motion Bank, particularly working with digital media. And they're working on this goal with our 2 education partners. Their what they do is, I think they're exploring the potential of these new resources coming out of the practice to somehow be taken back into the practice. How to transfer ideas that are translated from the body into another medium, the publication, back into the body. And this work in the context of education is really challenging. It takes much more time and focus than you might imagine. One of our education partners working on this challenge is going to give the Choreographic Resources Lab tomorrow afternoon, sharing what they've discovered. And much more of this education research work is going to be presented or somehow accessible at the final live and online event in the end of November that we do. And for some of our workshops, we've invited practitioners from different disciplines, such as architecture and dance, to work together, exploring how the practices of writing, notating, and scoring, and the products, the sort of objects produced of these practices, might mediate relations between different disciplines. So the kind of question we might be asking in that context is, can a score, or something like a score, capture a particular disciplinary way of thinking? And different disciplines bring different kinds of questions to these new resources that are coming out of dance practice. So the focus of something called Dance Engaging Science, which was an interdisciplinary research project running kind of alongside Motion Bank, was how and under what conditions might these different questions be collaboratively explored. And that's something that the salon tomorrow morning is going to discuss and address, those kinds of issues. So finally, Motion Bank was really set up in particular to explore what digital media and computation can offer us in this project of rendering choreographic ideas visible. And I think this project has gone quite far in that direction. One of our partners in computer science uses computer vision algorithms to extract 3D spatial pathways and then contribute this information to the materials that we developed for Deborah Hayes' project. And you're going to see the results of that contribution from computer science in the presentation to follow. And another partner is developing video annotation software based on ongoing research at the Forsyth Company, which we're also using for the work with Deborah and Jonathan and Matteo. And what I think is interesting is that this video annotation software provides really the first step in rendering choreographic ideas visible in this project. Because the video annotation makes it possible for the artist or anybody else to choose an important moment, to recognize something, to pay attention to something, mark it, and name it. And that may seem sort of simple as an idea, and it's more of a human process than a machine process, obviously. But in many cases, that's the first level of analysis that can be built on further to produce the kinds of resources that we're producing coming out of practice. And you'll see some of that in Florian's presentation of the material we're working on with Deborah, what that video annotation software has provided us in the project with her. But really, and this is the last thing that I really want to contribute here, is that the crucial ingredient for us here in Frankfurt has been, we're not in Frankfurt.
We're always in Frankfurt.
Almost in Frankfurt, hour and a half from Frankfurt. Here in Dusseldorf, that's the trouble with writing your text, you know, you're like, has been how the crucial ingredient for us has been how the digital artists working on the project have responded to its challenges. Because with no prior experience in dance at all, Florian and Amin have dug deeply into Deborah Hayes' practice. They've worked tirelessly, not only experimenting with and exploring the data they produced, but also spending hours observing Deborah's materials, both live and recorded. Really, literally, hours. I think that they've come as close as possible to deeply understanding Deborah's way of working without participating physically in one of the workshops or one of the commissioning projects. So not only have they translated her choreographic ideas into a digital medium in a way that I think sheds light on those ideas by rendering them visible in new ways, which you'll see, but they've also developed their own artistic work, informed by what they've come to understand of dance and about dance. So these are deeper collaborative connections than I had actually envisioned myself at the start of the project until I got to know them and started working with them. And to me, they seem to suggest, I think they suggest an interesting new way to think about the production of these resources coming out of dance practice. And I'm still working on what the implications of this might be. But the phrase that's been coming up is and the sort of field of practice that they're also coming out of is the practice of creative coding. So I'm beginning to envision something like collaborative creative transcoding, where digital artists get deeply involved somehow in the work that we do, and the collaborations are in some way much more infused by artistic sensibilities from both sides, rather than, say, design or other directions that we've tended to look in for this collaboration. So that said, I could also say that this afternoon later, there will be a workshop with Janine Durning in which you might, if you go to that workshop, experience the nature of what I think some of these deeper connections are. That rounds up, not too bad, 8 minutes, that's what I said, rounds up my trying to frame a little bit the breadth of research that we're doing at the same time as we're working on these scores, and also integrate in working on these scores. And what I'd like to do now to sort of return back to the notion of an artist-initiated publication project or publications coming out of the practice is to sort of switch back over to Bill and Deborah, Jonathan and Matteo, to say something in particular about those particular publications that they produced and the sorts of inspiration that they had to do that kind of work. So I have asked Deborah to be the first person I could pose that question to say something about that work that, when you began that, and maybe the motivation for writing the books you've written in particular.
Right. Yes. I started writing my dance because I was reading about Deborah Hay, and I couldn't relate to a lot of what I was reading. and I thought that I better start writing my dancing because I'm not reading it. And when I die, I don't want people to have this idea of my dance. So I started writing it. And it's been fantastic. To be writing, the language I use is to put in linear form this nonlinear feedback, and the translation of the nonlinear feedback into linear feedback. And then, as you said, Scott, I mean, what happened for me was I take the nonlinear, I put it in linear form, and then I learned something I didn't even know. Mm-hmm. And then I could take the linear form and bring it back to the nonlinear, and they really worked very well together. And so both of my books are out there, and I'm working on a new book. And this project takes it even further. I mean, so I've gone from nonlinear to linear back to nonlinear, and I think it's very exciting. So,
thank you.
Thank you,
Jonathan. Could you offer something about the inspiration for your the choreographer's handbook?
Oh, well, no, that was just. That book I started writing because I just observed that there was an absence of something which reflected all the ways that people that came to workshops at that time with me were talking about how they were, what their process was, and so it was an attempt to record over a period of years what a lot of different artists said, and then to frame it in such a way that that reflected this kind of much wider field than I saw was available from books at that time. And whether they succeeded, I don't know, but that was the attempt.
Yeah. I don't know, had you published before similarly, or was that what that was the first?
No, it was a kind of leap into the unknown somehow.
And what do you feel like the feedback is from the world, having put it out into the world?
Well, it did this thing that I think probably many people would recognize, that somehow, because it was a lot of ideas that had been floating around in my head and in my practice for a long time, and by putting it onto the page and then somebody officially buys it off you and prints it, it distances it. It distances the body of ideas from you, and then you're free again. You can actually disagree with them. Because up until then, they've been running your life, you know.
Yes, I've heard that before. I think with some of the artists who published that it does tend to fix something on the page, and then it has a way of opening up space to leave that behind to a certain extent. There's something interesting with your book, which I like to reflect on a little, because the work that we're doing here is highly imagistic. I mean, there are lots of images of different kinds in this work. And you're very explicit in the introduction to your book that there are no images. There's a single image, and that happens to be on the cover. And you probably, I don't know if you resisted that as well. But
no, there's a photograph of my mother tap dancing on the second page.
That's on the program. But can you say something about the, I know why you did that, you framed it.
No, it was just because from what I've read about how we motor learn, human beings are very good mimics. So what I'd noticed was that if I have a book about performance and it's got photographs in it, no matter how interesting the text is, what I end up doing is copying the photographs. So I thought that it would be interesting to challenge that by removing any. But the people that copied my mother tap dancing, I thought this could only be a good thing.
I think what's, you know, this, in a way, that particular book illustrates the range of heterogeneous, you know, of diverse ways in which you might approach the idea of publishing something out of practice. I think we have the opportunity to explore an extraordinary range of tools and techniques for visualizing, and as I remarked, the collaboration with the digital artists has, I think, brought definitely a new dimension to this particular kind of work. But the use of image in Bill in improvisation technology, in the CD-ROM, which I'm sure that you're mostly familiar with, has always struck me as extremely useful in a sense, in terms of this kind of idea, because of the way in which it shows an idea, which cannot, if you know what I'm referring to, I'm referring to specifically to the small lectures that you give, that you demonstrate, in which he describes a principle, you demonstrate the principle, and the principle is additionally illustrated by a simple technique, which was also manually difficult to do, took a long time, but of simply annotating the top of the video, which draws your attention to the nature of the idea in 3 ways. That's what strikes me as most interesting, because it seems like it unpacks a kind of idea, which is not necessarily purely conceptual, it's not necessarily purely physical, it's a combination, it's deeply entwined, and I think that has an interesting way of illustrating the nature of the kinds of ideas which I think are potentially coming out of practice. Were those the kinds of things you were imagining then when you worked on that?
Well, the whole thing was actually really practical. We were, actually, the kind of improv that we were doing was used because we had very little rehearsal time. And so it was a shortcut. So what we'd do is we'd use improv to make a section and then maybe go back over the years and fill it in a more concrete way. But it was sort of like a placeholder often. And as dance ensembles are, there would be a change, generational change. And rather than, you know, take the time to go, and this is that and that and that, and we're using this to help ourselves out, we made this document. And the document got made, this is the CD-ROM with the improv tech on it. It got made because a man named Seth Goldstein and another guy named Paul Kaiser had heard that we were doing this, and they said, we have right now the means to actually perform a kind of, how do you say, illustration of this. It wasn't my idea at all. And then I had this kind of funny realization in the bathtub one night, and a voice spoke to me, and it said, no joke, seriously. And it said point line. And I thought someone was in the bathtub with me. I was like, in the bathroom rather, and I was in Paris in 1987. And it might have been the wine, who knows, you know. But in any case, it's kind of weird if you go point, you know, point, the whole thing, line. You have something which you sense, yeah, but you don't have anything. But you do have something, but you don't have anything. And I think this is sort of fundamental to dance. You have something, but you don't have something. Someone recently gave me a Cy Twombly quote, the painter, and it said, a line. Sorry, I'm really bad with quotes. Sorry, but it's a very interesting one. I have it right here, so don't panic. Twombly. Oh, he said, a line is the sensation of its own realization. Yeah. So basically, improv tech was already focused on sensations that dancers already had. Yeah. I realized in a club one night when I was dancing that I was actually choreographing. There's a section called Ewing or Owing, something like this. Yeah. And that happened in a club, because I realized, what am I doing? Oh, that's what I'm doing, like that. So it was a sensation first, and then I sort of went afterwards, I went, well, it's that. So I began to just examine different things that happened while dancing, and I thought, okay, if people are going to improvise, could they use that document to sort of go, what did I just do? Or is there a method emerging, something like that? So it was practical.
Yes. I thought it was, at the time, for the company itself to communicate those ideas.
It was like a shortcut.
Yeah.
Yeah, for learning. Yeah.
The sorts of I think that particular technique of drawing the viewer's attention to something in the movement, in the practice, also inspired you to move forward on the next project, where the similar technique of annotating on top of video, which is the Synchronous Objects website, which is the pilot project for Motion Bank, uses that same method of drawing your attention to choreographic structures in the work by having lines, animated lines on top of the image. And it was an extension. It was sort of exploring the possibility that same technique could be used to, based on the sort of success that particular idea had seemed to have with improvisation technologies, if that could be extended to a whole work and then eventually developed into the website. This was something which was, and I was peripherally involved in that project, and we began to discuss the possibility of using the kinds of techniques with different choreographers, or the value of doing that, challenging what it is that we might invent in order to somehow make accessible choreographic approaches which might not lend themselves so easily to annotating lines drawn on top of video. Yeah. And so the first artist that we're working with has presented that challenge. Deborah Hayes' work Deborah's really the first person she's the first one we've worked on with the Motion Bank project. Jonathan Mateo are the second project we're working on, and then at Ohio State University they're working with two other choreographers, Thomas Howard, who may even be here, it's possible. I think he came in a little late, and B.B. Miller. And I think what I'd like to do is to segue into Florian presenting, kind of leaving those ideas. I just wanted to probe you guys a little bit for the kinds of publishing projects you've already done and worked on. And I'm going to invite Florian to come up and begin presenting the website. And then we'll come back to all of you to share reflections on what it is you see here.
Stay with me.
Yeah. I stay.
Can we dim that down a tad? Yeah, perfect.
Well, just to preface it with where we sort of got into when we began working with Deborah, she began to, your approach was to take your solo score, No Time to Fly, which is here in this booklet, and send that to 3 dancer choreographers who are experienced with your work, Janine Durning, Roz Vorby, and Juliette Mapp. And they practiced the dance for 3 months and developed what Deborah refers to very clearly as their own adaptations, solo adaptations of her choreography, the score, No Time to Fly. And this is really the core material that we've been working with. And Florian's going to, I think you'll move into the concept, filming those kinds of things. They came to Frankfurt in April 2011, where we filmed each, Janine and Roz and Juliette, performing their adaptation 7 times. So we have a total of 21. And the reason that we had to choose that particular way of approaching Deborah's work is that it would not be at all appropriate, and there are other words for it, to select a single instantiation, a single performance of Deborah's work, and call it the fixed performance. Her work, her choreography is a choreography of perception. It's a choreography where the movement may change, but the choreography always remains the same. The choreography is in the score, the structures are in the score, but each performance of it is different. So how could we, and that's the nature of the work, that's intrinsically part of the choreographic approach. So how is it that we could find the kinds of structures that we might be able to kind of access in that work and reveal things, hopefully, that would help us then further study her choreographic approach. And I'm going to turn it over to Florian to kind of lay out some of that territory and how they began to do this.
Just snatched half of my information.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. You want me to stay here still?
No, you can go. Go, please go. Can you
down.
turn the mic off, please? No. So.
He's black. Okay.
Hello. I'm very happy to be here. It's like finally we get to release something. It's the first release of many of releases that we plan to happen until November, end of November exactly, when our final release is going to be. We're going to show a flyer in the end with a date, and you got to mark the date because you got to be in Frankfurt for our final release. So we're starting to release stuff because although we know it's very fragile at the state we are with the stuff we build, that it's very important to include you guys. So we want to have feedback, and we don't want you to come back and whine about why it's not running on Internet Explorer or something. So, okay, got that out. When we started to work on the project, we had no clue, and sometimes I feel we're still at the beginning, and sometimes I feel we still have no clue, although people come back to us and say we have, but yeah, we're still super curious, we're super happy about the things we find, and it's been an adventure, it's been hard work for a couple of while, and we're sort of proud where we are, but we feel we still want to go on. And we will go on with Jonathan and Matteo, like for the next half year. When we started out, we did some research because we thought, well, if there are tools available, why not just use those tools and, you know, have a easier life with that kind of stuff. And we found that most of the tools that were available are either not generic enough for us to work with all kinds of choreographies. And actually, I remember someone quoted Bill saying that he picked Deborah and Jonathan and Matteo because they're going to be so hard to cover for us. So that was definitely true. So we found there's not much there that we could instantly use, and the stuff like technologically, some of the stuff we found that looked interesting was extremely expensive. So one aspect that developed there is that we wanted to build something that's open. So we want to share our tools as well in the end, not just the website. So when I'm talking about tools, I'm not actually talking about the website, which is a tool in itself too, but there are more tools, like the tools behind the tool, so to say. We're using Peacemaker quite a lot. Where's Martin behind the camera? Hello, Martin. And David, I saw David somewhere. Hey, David. Thanks for Peacemaker. And we use processing. That's an open development environment. And we're planning on sharing our source code. We're planning on sharing the data, which takes the time to prepare to be shared. And you're eager to look into this thing, probably, so I'm going to dive into that. One aspect that just surfaced there is it's not only about getting to know a choreographer, getting to know a choreography, a way of working, finding a way of communicating, recording stuff, visualizing stuff, kind of trying to communicate stuff that's in there, and then build a website. It's actually a lot about building the tools around that. So building a system that can hold that, building tools to kind of drag out the visuals from the data in a way that it will actually work. So one thing we had to do, and so I'm going to take you through sort of the back door into the actual choreography work, is that we built a sort of a system. I'm entering. This is actually a website, so don't worry, it's just full screen because the title bar is always the same, so you're not interested in the title bar, but it's a website. So that was the front page, and we just entered. So we built a tool that will allow us for...
Okay, Dave, can you see?
Yeah, we might shift a little bit here just so people can see. Don't be worried. We're not leaving.
You can join me if you want. So we built a tool to not only hold, but that would allow us for rearranging all the data bits that we have. The recordings, and we collected interviews, and we collected this kind of data and that kind of data, and it's all a huge sum of stuff. And we needed a tool that would allow us to easily, flexibly work with that, rearrange it, kind of making points, and kind of be outlining those concept blobs, if you want. And the tool we built is actually the score website. And it consists of a grid, which visually might change a bit. This is like from 2 hours ago. And it's a huge panning, I called it kilt. Is it kilt?
Yeah.
Like a carpet with bits and pieces that come from our back end. So all the stuff we collected. And we can freely drop it in there, and we can freely arrange it to make certain points. And this is basically the index of our score website. And the backend we use to build that looks like this. You're never going to get access to that. So you can look at it now, but forget it afterwards. It's going to be much better in the end. So we're planning on releasing actually this sort of editor part of the website in the end for you to be able to use the data we collected, like really granular pieces of data, like single recordings, single kind of a 3D path of one recording, and kind of build your own logic, build your own ideas, test your own ideas around those data sets. The editor we have now is sort of for us to be able to work with it. Scott sucks at coding, so we had to build something visual, and this is what we came up with. So it's sort of, you have an overview of this carpet, and you can add tiles, simple. You can add columns, you can add rows, you can move stuff in there, you can kind of, make stuff larger, you can, that's not the title, this is the title. So I can kind of change stuff in the website, I can change how the recordings react, and this allows us to build those views. So the view we're actually looking at is just a collection of the recordings. That's those 21 recordings that we did in April 2011, which is still the main data set we're working with. The final data set just like arrived a week ago because we just collected so much data that we were like totally flooded. So we had to really fight those huge piles of data, and it just took a while to be processed. So we focused on working with the first one that was ready, which was actually our test shooting. So all the data, all the recordings you're going to see are from that test shooting in April 2011, holding 21 recordings, as you already said, 7 per performer. Am I too slow? No. Anyway,
You
so
could probably slow down a little bit.
oh, okay, too fast. Translation's bad.
Translation could be tricky.
Okay, so this is basically just a view of the recordings. I'm not sure I've dragged all of those in. What I can do here is I can add more recordings, and down here you actually see all the data that's in the database currently, and that's just like a bit of what we have, actually. So I could say, I want to have Janine and Armin, an interview snippet that we recorded, and I want to have a piece of one of Armin's score translation studies. And if I save now, I'm going to screw the set in the front page, so I'm not going to do that, but you kind of get the picture. So going back to there. No, actually, we're going to go on. So we had this recordings, and if you know Deborah's work, and if you've probably or hopefully seen, hopefully seen No Time to Fly at some occasion. If not, you should definitely try to do that. Because this is all about No Time to Fly, the solo, which became a trio under the name As Holy Sites Go, and now is a duet. Sort of it's morphing and evolving, and that's part of the nature, actually, of it. And that's actually part of our challenge. So we had this 21 recordings, and each of those was different in terms of length, in terms of many aspects. And when we started to learn about Deborah's work, we quite early realized that it's going to be really hard to apply standard procedures to that, because it's not something that has a clear structure that you can just use and apply to the recording. So what we needed to do and what we thought of is we treat this like a generative system in a way, like a system that will be confined. It's a clear, it has a clear rule set is a bad word for it, but think of it as, mechanisms inside. And it will produce new instances of the same thing that aren't the same. So we were trying to cover that room of variance, that room of possibilities, like taking pictures of footsteps in the snow. So after a while, you have 20 people run through that place, and you'll figure where like the common pathway is. So that kind of tracing. So the 21 recordings helped us, and then we faced this huge chunk of, data that we somehow had to kind of interrelate, to synchronize, interrelate. The recordings had different length. They varied, I think, from between shortly over 30 minutes to over 40, and differences in there. What we did is we used Peacemaker to marker that data set. Peacemaker is a video annotation software and much more. Actually, I call it a process documentation software. And we kind of added tiny tidbits to it that we needed for our process, which is this timeline, which actually shows you one recording from left to right. And these are markers that we added or had people add at points that they thought were important, and the markers we added are actually markers that will relate that moment in time in that recording to the score text. Where is it? Yep. So we kind of used the score text, looked for specific areas in there. We gave them a marker, and related those markers to the actual recordings, which then allowed us to be able to compare those specific areas. So we can kind of realign every recording in between each other. Gonna open my thing, a set that I built. I called it the movement character, which is sort of a first attempt of using our system to transport, to communicate one of those ideas. And this set talks or tries to talk about the character of the scenes. There are no scenes in the score, but the character of these areas that I just talked about, and the character of the performer that surfaced from the data set, from our observances. The website, these tiles, they are sort of smart. They know the status of the other tiles. So what you see, the white thing with the tabs, that's actually the score booklet. So it has the cover in here, and sort of the intro and stuff. And then it starts with the text. There is no text for the first thing. And so you can read through that booklet on the website. And while you read through that booklet, all the material around it, all the recordings, all the data sets will readapt because we have those markers that can interrelate those things. Pretty simple mechanism, which actually puts all the weight on the guy that builds the set, but that's okay. Rather him than you. The green stuff, you call it seaweed. I'm not sure if that's appropriate. Let's call it spinach or something. This is 7 recordings, the pathway of 7 full recordings overlaid. And on the lower right, you see, I'm not sure if you can see that, actually. On the lower right, you see the same thing for a different performer. Blue is Ross Warby, green is Juliet Mapp, with one of the paths highlighted. And when I start Juliet's recording down here, the tile with the highlighting will adapt to that video. And actually, while you're watching that video and you kind of move through time, you can see both the score text and actually the neighboring tiles adapt to that. So it's possible for you to study both the recording and the data that we collected from that at once. The point I'm trying to make with this set is that there is a certain character to these areas in the choreography that we found when we had those 3D paths. And I'm going to show you some, and you're going to hopefully agree with me that these have a specific character to them. So it's Ross Warby to the right, at the top to the right, Juliet Mapp in the middle, and Janine Durning, who's here, at the bottom. This is the curved path, which has sort of a clear instruction in terms, well, yeah, the text has a clear guidance for a path to travel, which you can see here. And you can see the way this has been solved by different performers. I'm going to stop Juliet down here. She's taking control. Another one to look at is this one. Stop it. We termed it the hidden diagonal. And again, you see a certain character to the line, and you see a certain character to that scene. I'm calling it scene, forget the scene name. That part of the choreography. Number 19. Stop. This is tiptoeing. Number 21. No, 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 no. And number 23. So these were pathways that were performed based upon the score text, based upon the performer's knowledge of those, Deborah's practice. And some of those are very different, some of those are very similar. And this is sort of what I call the character of a scene. And as well as that, you can see a character of a performer in those drawings that emerge from that data set. One thing I looked at is the use of space. It's a different thinking behind use of space than dancers normally have, I had to learn. So what we're calling, or what I called the use of space, is actually sort of outlining the area that someone traveled. So it's, if I traveled from there to here, so my use of space would be this sort of a line or something, similar to the red thing at the side. So it's like an outline around all the dots I made. And this use of space, oh, I'm lacking my score. Oh, there it is. Shows another, if you want, it shows a certain character of the performer. What we found is that Janine actually uses more, she's more spacious. She uses more of the stage area than the others do. I can just quickly run you through some of the views. So this is again the curved path that we saw in the beginning. And you see some of, Roz at the top, she's very aligned. It's like, I don't know what that shape is, but so it centers in the middle and it has clear starting points at the side. Juliet is she's using more of the side, but still she ends up pretty, confined in the middle. And Juliet she has a very different way of solving that problem, if you want to call it a problem, but translating that part of the score into performance. Number 21. Number 14. Number 18. I'm just going to go through some of those images. And from Monday on, I think we agreed on that. We're going to open up, and you can access the website and look at those things yourself.
Should I show the other two now?
No, I have still like 4 more. Number 21, 23, 25, 26. Insights.
So Florian's kind of come in from the side of the data collection, and what it is that we were able to extract from the analysis, the peacemaker, the temporal markers, combined with the spatial pathways, which came from the 2 computers here, which registers clear regularities in the performances of the 3 different performers. But in order to kind of bring this together so that this could augment or somehow support further insights into our work, we've included if I go to the...
No, should I? No. It's to the right.
There were 2 really important things that we've included here. One is insights from the dancers themselves, which we've collected from Janine and Roz, in which they've described the nature of their experience, what it is, the direction of their attention and their perception during the performance of some of the sections in the dance. And an introduction to concepts, because I'm trying to think about which one to go. They're very simple. I'll show you they're very simple in a sense. As Florian showed, you can start the performance running and just simply watch the performance of Janine. You can, if you're building your own set, you can look at different performances. There's a different one down here that you could watch if you wished. This one's from day 5, take 1. This visualization shows you the particular path she's on. But what you can do is you can you can contrast, in a way, the nature of the language, because language is such a crucial part of Deborah's approach to making work. The ways in which language impinges on the body, the ways in which the language is actually the thing that helps to guide, kind of orchestrate the choreography of perception. And where that language begins, so you're able to, either we would wait for Janine to move into the next section in the dance, which we could wait for. She's here performing the first section. And then you would see the score jump forward to the sixth section, this section here. So we could, I mean, if you come to this on Monday and you take a look, I really encourage you just simply to watch, and you'll see that the score will change forward. And that gives you a chance to contrast the nature of the language on the left with the nature of the more introspective, the kind of introspective language on the right, which is an attempt to communicate the nature of the experience a little bit. And somewhere sitting in between here, in the space between these two registers, language kind of registers, one being the score, the written score, one being the reflection, what we're hoping for, because in a way what we wish to publish is an opportunity for you to discover your things yourself in this material. Relationships which we're looking at, but we're not, in some ways, not quite sure what to make of yet. We're also interested in continuing to study this now that we've got it in this sort of general form. It enables study, whereas before it was more collecting, analyzing, thinking through things. The other one is a set.
That's the interview.
That's right.
On concepts. So for example, this one, and I built this one as a way to try to sort of ease you in to concepts that Deborah and I agreed were quite fundamental to her way of working, concepts around the notion of what if. So you're able to
On Monday.
You're able to play these very short clips. Now, if you go outside, you'll see in the installation, the auto-playing installation, you'll see a number of these clips, and you'll get a feeling for the taste. We chose on purpose not to assemble one sort of long interview with Deborah, kind of trying to explain things in some sort of coherent narrative fashion, but to choose snippets, just sort of tastes of ideas and language that she expresses. And then to assemble these in such a way that you can compare and contrast them with the score itself, along with performances. And even in this set, you have a chance to explore the nature of some of the visualizations, which show some of the regularities and the contrasts. So this is one set we assembled. The set that Florian showed you earlier was also assembled. The commentary set is assembled, and these will all be there for you to look at and sort of explore yourself on Monday. And the last set that we want to show you is Amin's adaptation set, and we probably should do that fairly quickly.
Right. You want to show you a set or the
I
movie?
think it's best to go to the set,
You
actually.
can show the set first.
I think we're...
Because this is the first idea, one of the first ideas we had when we got the score of Deborah is that this could be executed in any way. So we had the idea to translate it into another medium, but still relate to the score. And this is a first version of the adaptation, which is linked together with the score, so you can see the animation and the insights and the score, which is basically playing. So I'm going to show you the thing right now. And just talk about it a little bit. Well, this has been quite a long journey for me because I was working on this adaptation for, I don't know, half a year. It's almost impossible to count because there have been so many approaches trying to grasp the complexity and the mesmerizing character of the performers when you see them on stage and translate them in your own language. And we as so-called digital artists deal with things in this way. So, is there sound? There's no sound now. So you see, I made this animation in memory of the performances I saw and true to the score. So you can see this animation in the website, in the set, and kind of read the part of the score which is it's representing.
Just let it run.
Yeah, well, so I started off with doing simple studies, with just working with lines and basic, simple structures, try to build relations, try to build the expressions, try to get a grip of the timing. And then, after some times, I thought, okay, well, I have to go back to the basics, so I really started drawing again. This is the sound from the performers. And I did some drawings which didn't work out so well, so then I came back and said, okay, all these very abstract forms which I'm working with are not going to help me in any way, because I need some kind of a body to express it. But it doesn't have to be a real 3D body in a way, because that's too limited and it would look like you're in an uncanny valley or something. So I kind of made a system where you have a body-like ragdoll thing in a way, which you can control with different influences, with different forces and things that make it move, and make it move in a way which kind of represented the attention that I got when I was watching the performances, because that was mainly my main influence about how this adaptation basically came out at the end. And it's probably not yet finished in my sense, but it's almost finished. So I try to grasp the character of the performers and try to express it in my medium, which is this. What else is there to say?
Just let it run.
On the page you saw with the set are interviews, Janine actually probing Amin's process, how he made that, to try to give you some insight into the kind of deeper understanding, which as a way of augmenting your experience of watching this. This is in its entirety, I think it's 14 minutes or so out in the installation part, so you can watch it there. And I think maybe we could open up to some. I mean, now we've presented the basic body of material that's there. We presented the sets that we've curated and made, and those will be available for you to explore yourselves from Monday on. As Florian said, the site's quite vulnerable, but we decided it's better to put it out and get feedback and comments. The tool that Florian showed that helps you assemble these sets yourself, this is an innovation we think is, I mean, from the education research side that I mentioned earlier, the opportunity to build your own sets, publish your own combinations of information for your students or a class situation seems quite ideal. And so that, as a tool, we're intending to make or to release at the end of the year, at the end of this whole process. I would like to, if it's okay with you guys, to sort of segue into and give you guys an opportunity, if you have questions or comments that you'd like to pose, and then open up to questions from you guys out there. And I think we're well on time, so we can relax. We can take a little bit of time with this and then close. I know that Jonathan Matteo have seen this setup before, and I think we're going to use we probably use the same kind of tool in assembling, working on your material. But I'll give you a moment if you have a question or a comment, Deborah in particular, if you have something you want that reflects on your, in a way, I guess it reflects on your experience somehow, seeing how this has evolved.
Let's see, the title of the website is Using the Sky, and that's what I think Florian and Amin did. They've taken this just to think that a dance could inspire the experimentation and the exploration in other individuals really makes me feel really great. Like it, and the way I see it, that it isn't a reduction of my work, it's an expansion of art making. And you know, if you could go online and, you know, have an expansion of art making, the tools to expand how you experiment and explore, then I think that is fantastic. So, yeah.
I think what was most surprising when we published online, actually the first digital publication also, was who became the users. That was really interesting because it wasn't, surprisingly enough, dance people like we maybe thought, but it ended up being people in robotics, a lot of people in architecture, and I thought it was kind of nice in our field where we tend to be a little bit self-devaluating, sort of going, oh, what use is it for whatever, when we're asked, yeah. These ideas had some currency, in other domains. That actually something in the idea was interesting, if not useful, to someone in a very, very different practice, or at least what I thought was a different practice, and maybe that practice proved not to be so distant, or as distant as I thought. It was, I thought, interesting in the senses we're all often private about ideas. The processes are fairly intimate in the studio, and then now once you're publishing your ideas, they're open to critique, evaluation, and also helps, as Jonathan said, helps you to move right on. People go, do you use improv tech? And I'm like, no. And it's interesting also how your ideas get used for purposes you would never ever think of, either choreographically or otherwise. And I think it's kind of nice. You stop having ideas about your own ideas, you know what I mean, in a good way, like how it should be used, the right way to use it or the wrong way to use it. Yeah.
Deborah, you mentioned, actually I think there is a small trailer on the website which gives some of this background. And there's a small clip where you say that after so many years of trying to disrupt patterns, it's something to see patterns sort of revealed. Can you sort of rephrase that or repeat that, and maybe we could explore what the implications of that might be?
Well, I think I thought I think I thought that there were no patterns.
Wow.
And lo and behold, most humbly, these guys have revealed to me the narrowness of my thinking. So, yes.
But they're still totally invisible. They're only visible if you go with this and point it at the performance.
Well, the patterns reveal themselves through aggregation. I mean, you're layering 7 performances one on top of the other through that, and then that's a view you would not be able to achieve in single instances. So having to lay them down one on top of the other reveals regularities and tendencies. Again, I think that we're here to offer these kinds of materials and discoveries. I feel that we're just at the first stage of further discoveries or further thinking about the implications. I mean, what does it mean that we've done this, we've layered this? What does that mean for an understanding of the nature of the practice? So I think I don't have answers to those questions. These are opening up as questions as a result of doing this work. And I'm hoping that, I think one of the things we've discussed in the back room, and then I think I'd like to open up for questions out here, but this reflects on Jonathan and Matteo's approach, is that you may want to rephrase it, Florian, but it's the idea that we're revealing patterns. Jonathan Mateo's work is the patterning is, in a way, the complexity, the counterpoint. The patterns are explicit in the sense that they're counted. There are certain counting patterns. There are certain patterns that you know you're using, and they're explicit in the scores themselves, the ones you read. And we're wondering. The other day, we recorded their material. And we have these pattern-seeking approaches, but what happens if we only reveal the patterns that you can see anyway and that you know are already there? That really would contrast, whereas Deborah is able to say, that's revealing something new. We have a question as to whether or not we'll discover new relationships. I'm confident we will, but that's the nature of this particular moment.
I was just going to add that, because for Matteo and I, the attraction of walking into a digital world was that it seemed the opposite of what we do or are interested in as much as the ways that we work with Patna a lot about overloading ourselves so that it breaks down. So the fear was that the digital doesn't break down, but in fact what we've observed in the things that Florian and I have shot of Matteo and I so far, and the processes that they used with them, is that what happens is that when the material is analyzed in a digital way, the normal human focal points are gone. The eyes, or our tendency to recognize gesture or body posture. So the digital becomes this very democratic eye, and actually it doesn't erase the accidents. It appears to amplify them. So, for instance, from our piece, Both Sitting duet, if you watch it in performance, you're watching two hands and two sets of eyes. But in some of the digital manifestations, what I was seeing was the way that the bodies were rocking backwards and forwards, which was equal to the hands because of this open field that isn't pointing you at one thing. So this I thought was remarkable, that somehow the digital was which is always seen as post-human in some way, was actually revealing something very human. This has been my pleasure in seeing it so far.
Thanks, Jonathan. I think I'd like to, it's okay, open up for questions here from all of you who are still here. I know there are overlapping events, so some people are going out, and probably we can also finish a little bit early to catch some sun. But why don't we see any questions or comments? If there's anything to clarify, yes, please, here. There's one here. Or to anybody here on the stage, not just to.
I wonder, when you put your animation of the dance material, I would say, and put on the other half of the screen the real dancing person, would this fit? Would this go parallel, the movements?
Well, it's not really taken from actual movement data. It's more about the character of the performer, or of my interpretation of the score. So it's really a mixed. But you can put a slide of somebody performing one scene next to the animation, and then you see them both perform, and then you kind of get a relationship towards each other, or not, but most of the time you do, because
so that means that what you've done is really kind of a digital interpretation of this piece of dance.
Well, it's more an artistic adaptation in a way.
I'd say it's a performance.
Or a performance.
No.
Go for it.
Very long performance.
Yeah. This is what I'm wondering, is if another generation or another group of choreographers might emerge in another medium as opposed to stage. That seems to be what I felt after doing Synchronous Objects, that the people working on the animations were very interested on doing their own choreographies, which you manifested. You said, oh, actually, I'd like to see how I deal with the principles that Deborah's offering. And so you basically have become a choreographer.
in a way, but I really have huge respect for all the work that the real choreographers do, because I'm just working with my own strange little abstract bodies, but you have to deal with real bodies and people.
Suck it up,
who are
you are
kind
one.
of they call me digital artist, so it's just numbers.
I do encourage you to see the discussions between Amin and Janine, because the way in which he approached the notion of body and getting a feeling for it, clearly the language that you use deals with a level of sensation and a level of aesthetics which correspond to the nature of the physical work, but it's in a different domain. It's extremely interesting, so I encourage you to go there and listen to those.
Do we get one of these? We don't get one of your films.
So, any more, or how are we? One here in the front?
Should we do an animation with you guys?
You've got a mic coming
I'm
here.
thinking more about it.
I just wonder whether you, Deborah Hay, whether you would rediscover your own work in the visual result that you saw?
I actually got inspired to choreograph. There's one part which we didn't show, which was everyone, a shadow of, what do you call it, a silhouette of all of the dancers performing the whole piece in the space at the same time. When I saw that, I thought, I want to make a piece based on that. So, could you show it?
I try. It's
yeah.
there, but somewhere. And you don't go home and try that, okay? Let me see. Go on talking.
Do another question in the meantime?
Yeah, another question.
I could add something to that. Did you have, because I don't know, did you have a visual image on what you were physically doing while you were actually choreographing the piece before?
No.
So it was just a physical. So you didn't have a visual picture of what you were doing when you were doing the choreography.
It's not the way I work.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you stay for the talk after this, you'll get a better, you'll get a clearer picture.
And we have tried to embed some, give you an opportunity to get some of that information about Deborah's approach to the use of image or not image in the interview snippets. She's reflecting on that. There was one here?
Here we go. We got it.
I'm sorry.
You got it.
Sorry.
That's it.
Oh.
You haven't seen that. That's
Yeah.
all in all, actually. That wasn't finished when we visited you. So these are all 21 solo performances performed at once. So, well, one point this brings up is that actually once you collect the data, this is sort of a new material, and you can actually start to work with that. And we did that for a while. It didn't show really today, but we did all these kind of strange tests with the material,
Awesome, man.
replacing the performer with stuff that Google found, for example. So, yeah, there's more to come. Yeah, sorry.
I was wondering if the notations were done before an audience, and if and how what the relationship was with the score and the public, if it changed when it was being watched or not. If there was a relationship between the observers and the score, or the performer and the score, if there was any...
Like the markers we added?
No, just in general, if there was a way to notate a relationship between the performer or the performed score and the public, if there was a shift in perception, and if that was involved in
one thing I discovered, we visited Deborah in Austin a month ago, I think, and we've seen the duo, which came out, the duet, which came out of the trio, which came out of the solo, and I did all the markering, and then I tried to apply those markers, like the text, to what I see, and I lost it like 2 minutes in, And then I thought, wow, Deborah, she changed it again underneath, so we can't find it anymore. And we talked about it later on, and it's just the same. It's exactly the same. It didn't change at all, and I couldn't see it. So although I spent like 2 years with this material, really intimate, I still, if it's performed on stage, I cannot see it.
Douglas, we did do one experiment, which was to invite, in the April instance, to invite viewers into the space. And they used the Peacemaker software to mark. We asked them, Florian invited them to mark when they noticed a change. Simple instructions, noticed a change in the space. And we collected all of that. That's data, that's part of the data we collected, but we haven't done anything with it. But it was an attempt, not an uninteresting attempt, to correlate in some ways, because we thought if we could establish a pattern of things being noticed, which contrasted with the nature of the choreography, the perception, again, we would maybe reveal something interesting, an interesting tension in that relation. But we didn't go for it.
Need to add to that, if you're trying something like this, try to get non-dance people. The dance people, they added like 300 markers in one recording, which is like almost marking what they thought is a pose. So like the others were pretty good. Like on average, we're pretty exactly.
I should pay a little more attention here. I think their hands. Yes, here, please.
I have a remark in the question. The question is whether we are not going back to looking for the human element in all these digital, beautiful patterns. I mean, looking like in a Mickey Mouse animation to find the meaning of it. And this is one. Second, is there any difference between documenting or working with a good dance, like Deborah's, or not such a good dance? Something which in real life would look boring or commonplace. And the third thing I want to say is to mention John Harris, who was a collaborator of Noah Eshkol Wachman dance notation, who did this work in the 60s in digital work, outlining and finding the pattern of the dance notation dancers in real life. So it's just an homage I think he deserves.
Yes.
Your work is beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
So 3 questions, but there were 2 questions and a comment on Eshkol Wachman's work, and I know that work from the States, from the, there's on notation.
Sharon Lockhart did a big thing on Eshkol right
Sharon
now,
Lockhart,
the visual artist. Yeah, just did
beautiful work.
Amazing.
Goodness, the finding the human. Does anybody have a response to the idea of finding the human back into the?
Sure. If you look at those patterns, you see how individual the tendency or the choices are. Whereas, if I'm not mistaken, dancers have to, make choices.
You can actually see it on the left side. Right. So the top row is the top tile is Janine, the middle one is Juliet, and the low one is Roz. And what you see is the probability to change from one part of the text into the next part. And one of the tendencies we found here is that although these recordings vary over time, one of the performers managed to kind of scale the timing into those recordings, which is something you cannot see, but you find a character in there.
Could it have something also to do with, let's say, the notion of authority too? What does the score actually authorize and allow, but also what did they feel, the performers feel was appropriate or permitted? You know what I mean? The score is kind of specific in its complexity, but still there is something revealed about the elasticity of the relationship between Deborah and the performers, and again, how they feel in position or in relationship to Deborah's so-called origination position. You're being where it starts in one sense, but they start another process, and I don't know. It's a relationship, I guess. It's a picture of a dialogic moment there.
Janine, do you have any? Janine's here in the front. She's one of the small figures there, repeated 7 times. Do you have anything you want to anything you want to add to that notion?
In response to which?
Well, Bill was just commenting about how if I could paraphrase, the notion, the kind of authority, the freedom you have to work within these structures.
In response to the human thing.
Yeah.
Sort of. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't really think about Deborah's work or even this project as a non-human. I think we're always trying to get to the superhuman element of who we are, and I think Deborah's work in the relationship that she deals with the perception of the dancer. I mean, that's the elasticity that that Bill's referring to. That the choreography really is in the shifting, ongoing perception of the dancer as it's happening. So you're dealing with, yeah, the score, which is not anything goes. Certainly, it's very, very specific. So there are choices that I would never make in Deborah's work, but the work really is in this fluidity of perception. Yeah, there are other things to say about that, but that's what I'm saying right now.
So thank you very much.
Thanks for coming.
This is the first time being able to live with us. So.
There you go.